Listen to me. Before your mind wanders, before your doubts try to speak louder than truth, before the memories of pain rise up and attempt to steal your focus, listen. On January 27th, they wanted you gone. They spoke it without words. They planned it in silence. They felt it in their hearts. They looked at you and decided you were inconvenient, uncomfortable, unnecessary. They thought your removal would bring them peace. But hear me clearly now. You were right, and God was present. And this moment is not an accident. There are days in a person's life that look ordinary on the calendar, but are written in fire in the spiritual realm. January 27th was one of those days. You woke up carrying something heavy in your spirit. You felt pressure without explanation. You sensed resistance without a visible enemy. You questioned yourself, not because you were weak, but because you were standing at the edge of something that mattered. When opposition rises without warning, it is often because God has already decided your continuation is necessary. People only try to erase what threatens their false sense of control. They wanted you gone because your existence exposed what they were hiding. You didn't need to shout. You didn't need to fight. Your presence alone was enough. There is a kind of authority God places on a person that doesn't come from position or approval. It comes from alignment. When someone is aligned with God, even silently, it disrupts environments built on fear, manipulation, and compromise. That disruption makes people uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable, they don't ask questions, they make plans. But God does not consult committees when He decides who stays. God does not take a vote when He assigns purpose. God does not reconsider His will because people misunderstand you. On January 27th, while others were quietly hoping for your disappearance, God was reaffirming your assignment. While they were thinking of endings, God was thinking of expansion. While they were whispering your name with frustration, God was calling your name with intention. You felt it, didn't you? That strange knowing, that inner voice saying, something is wrong, but I am not wrong. That awareness that you were being resisted, not because you failed, but because you refused to become smaller. Many people would have doubted themselves in that moment. Many would have apologized for existing. Many would have stepped back and tried to earn acceptance. But deep down, something in you stood still. That stillness was not confusion. That stillness was God anchoring you so you would not be moved by the opinions of those who never had authority over your destiny. Hear this. Rejection is often evidence, not absence, of divine favor. When God places His hand on a person, that person becomes a sign. And not everyone wants to read that sign. Some want to tear it down. Some want to pretend it isn't there. Some want to replace it with something more manageable. But the sign remains because God does not mark people temporarily. When God marks you, He does it with eternity in mind. On January 27th, there was an invisible line drawn. You crossed it without realizing it. On one side was who you had been trying to survive as. On the other side was who God has been preparing you to become. The resistance you felt was not random. It was the friction of transition. It was the sound of doors closing that were never meant to stay open. It was the final protest of an environment that benefited from your silence and feared your growth. They wanted you gone because your obedience threatened their comfort. Not because you were perfect, but because you were persistent. Not because you knew everything, but because you refused to surrender your conscience. Not because you demanded attention, but because God's presence in your life demanded integrity. And integrity is dangerous in systems built on compromise. You must understand this clearly. God does not preserve you by accident. If you are still standing after an attempt to erase you, it is because God intervened in ways you may never fully see. Conversations were interrupted, decisions were delayed, plans lost momentum, intentions dissolved. Not because people suddenly became kind, but because God became loud in the unseen realm. When God decides someone must remain, no human strategy can override that decree. Do not minimize what happened. Do not brush it off as imagination. Spiritual perception is often dismissed by those who fear responsibility. You sensed it because God allowed you to sense it. Awareness is a form of protection. God does not warn people to scare them. He warns them to prepare them. And preparation is not panic, it is positioning. You were right to trust that inner alarm. You were right to pause. You were right to pray. You were right to stay grounded. You were right to listen more than you spoke. Wisdom is often quiet, while pride is loud. God was teaching you how to stand without explaining yourself. He was teaching you how to remain without begging. He was teaching you how to be unmovable without becoming bitter. Some of the people who wanted you gone believed they were acting in self-preservation. They thought removing you would restore balance. But balance built on injustice never lasts. Stability built on suppression eventually collapses. God allows certain tensions to expose truth. Your presence was exposing truth, and truth always provokes a reaction. Let me speak this into your spirit. You do not need to chase places that tried to replace you. You do not need to convince people who already decided. You do not need to relive January 27th with regret or anger. That day was not a loss, it was a revelation. It showed you who could not go with you. It revealed who benefits from your doubt. It clarified where God is calling you next. God is not offended by the fact that people rejected you. God is not surprised by their behavior. He already factored it into the plan. What matters is that you did not reject yourself. What matters is that you did not abandon your values. What matters is that you did not silence the voice God placed inside you. Preservatio begins internally before it becomes external. There are moments when God allows opposition not to remove you, but to refine you. Pressure reveals posture. Resistance reveals roots. When everything around you shakes and you remain, it means your foundation is deeper than you realized. God uses resistance to show you what you are truly anchored to. And on January 27th, you discovered that your anchor was not people's approval, but God's guidance. You may have wondered why God didn't simply remove the opposition entirely. Why allow the tension? Why permit the discomfort? Because growth requires contrast. Strength is revealed through strain. Faith matures when it is tested, not when it is applauded. God was strengthening your discernment. He was sharpening your spiritual hearing. He was preparing you for environments where the stakes are higher and the consequences are greater. Do not be afraid of the fact that some people are watching you closely now. When attempts to remove someone fail, observers become cautious. They start paying attention. They start wondering why. They start questioning assumptions. God uses survival as a testimony before words are ever spoken. Your continued presence is already saying something louder than explanation ever could. January 27th was not the end of something. It was the exposure of something. It exposed insecurity. It exposed fear. It exposed agendas. But it also exposed your resilience. It exposed God's covering over your life. It exposed the fact that you are not as easily removed as others assume. That realization alone shifts power dynamics. From this point forward, you must walk with clarity. Not arrogance, not suspicion, clarity. Know who you are. Know who sent you. Know why you are here. When God keeps someone in a place where they were not wanted, it is not for revenge, it is for purpose. There is work that still needs to be done. There are people who still need to see what faithfulness looks like under pressure. Guard your heart now more than ever. Not because you are weak, but because you are valuable. Do not let resentment take root where wisdom should grow. Do not let bitterness occupy space meant for vision. God preserved you so you could continue becoming, not so you could become hardened. Softness anchored in strength is a rare and powerful thing. You will notice a shift after this. Conversations will change. Energy will change. Expectations will change. Some people will retreat. Some will attempt to redefine their stance. Some will act as though nothing ever happened. Let them. You are not required to confront what God has already handled. Your responsibility is alignment, not explanation. Remember this, when God decides you must remain, it is because your leaving would create a void that cannot yet be filled. There is something in you that this season still requires, not because you are flawless, but because you are willing to listen, willing to stand, willing to trust God when clarity is incomplete. Do not rush the next step. Preservation often precedes elevation, but elevation requires preparation. God is teaching you how to carry weight without collapsing. He is teaching you how to remain humble without becoming invisible. He is teaching you how to trust His timing even when others are impatient with your existence. January 27th will not haunt you, it will strengthen you. One day you will look back and realize that was the moment you stopped needing permission, the moment you stopped shrinking to fit expectations that were never aligned with God's will for you, the moment you understood that survival itself can be a calling. Stay attentive, stay grounded, stay faithful. God did not keep you here by accident. And what He preserves, He also empowers. There is a sacred responsibility that comes with being spared when others expected your disappearance. Preservation is not permission to coast. It is a summons to rise with greater awareness. God does not keep people in place merely to prove a point. He keeps them because there is a dimension of His will that can only be expressed through their continued obedience. You are standing now in a season where your choices carry more weight than before. Every word, every reaction, every quiet decision matters because your life has become a living message. Even to those who refuse to listen, understand this deeply. When opposition fails, it often shifts into observation. Those who once hoped you would fade now watch to see if you will falter. They expect inconsistency. They anticipate collapse. They wait for you to contradict the strength you displayed under pressure. But God is teaching you how to remain steady when the eyes are many and the encouragement is few. Stability is one of the greatest forms of testimony. When you do not change your character to match the tension around you, it reveals the source of your strength. God is not only interested in what you survived, He is focused on how you retransformed by it. Survival without transformation breeds fear. Transformation without survival is impossible. But when both come together, a person becomes dangerous to systems built on limitation. You are being reshaped internally so that external pressure no longer defines you. The anxiety that once tried to whisper panic now finds no place to land because God has expanded your inner capacity to trust beyond what you can see. There are levels of trust that can only be learned when outcomes are uncertain. Anyone can praise when doors are wide open. Anyone can feel confident when acceptance is guaranteed. But faith matures when you stand in a room where you are tolerated, not celebrated, and still choose integrity. God watches closely in those moments, not to judge, but to refine. Not to test your loyalty, but to deepen your discernment. You are learning that not every battle requires a response. Silence, when guided by God, is not weakness. It is authority under control. There we read things said about you that God told you not to address. There were assumptions made that He instructed you to leave untouched. That restraint is building something powerful in you. Self-control, guided by faith, becomes spiritual strength. And spiritual strength alters atmospheres without confrontation. There is also a warning in this season. Do not romanticize rejection. Do not let pain become identity. You were not spared so you could relive the wound. You were spared so you could walk forward without chains. God heals not by erasing memory, but by removing its power. The memory of January 27th is no longer meant to sting. It is meant to instruct. It teaches you where discernment must be sharpened and where trust must be earned slowly. God is expanding your understanding of influence. Influence is not about being liked, it is about being aligned. When you align with God, your life begins to speak to people you never intended to reach. Some will be comforted by your resilience. Some will be confronted by it. Both reactions serve a purpose. Light does not negotiate with darkness. It simply exists, and in its presence, everything is revealed. There will come moments soon when you are tempted to shrink again, not because you are afraid, but because you are tired. Fatigue often disguises itself as humility. You may think stepping back is wisdom, but God will gently remind you that rest is not retreat. He is teaching you how to pause without surrendering ground, how to recover without relinquishing calling, how to breathe without backing away from purpose. Pay attention to the new strength forming in your prayers. They are becoming less desperate and more declarative, less focused on escape and more focused on alignment. That is growth. That is evidence that your faith is no longer rooted in outcomes but in trust. God responds powerfully to that kind of posture, not always with immediate answers, but with sustained peace that cannot be manufactured. There is also an invitation here to forgive without reopening doors. Forgiveness is not reconciliation, it is release. God does not ask you to restore access to those who mishandled your presence. He asks you to free your heart so it remains usable. A heart weighed down by resentment cannot carry revelation. And God intends to entrust you with deeper insight in the days ahead. Do not underestimate the quiet favor resting on you now. Favor is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Sometimes it looks like being overlooked and still protected. Sometimes it looks like remaining when logic says you should have been removed. Favor is God's ability to override expectation without explanation. And that favor is not temporary, it is progressive. You are stepping into a season where discernment will matter more than speed. Not every opportunity is a blessing. Not every open door is God's direction. You must listen carefully now. The same God who warned you before January 27th will continue to guide you if you remain attentive. He speaks most clearly to those who are willing to obey without applause. Remember this always. God does not preserve people for comfort, but for purpose. Comfort can dull obedience, but purpose sharpens it. You are being sharpened. Every challenge, every moment of restraint, every decision to trust instead of react is shaping you into someone who can carry more responsibility without losing humility. What comes next will require courage of a different kind. Not the courage to survive, but the courage to lead quietly, to stand firm without announcement, to walk confidently without needing validation. God is calling you into a deeper partnership with His will, where your life becomes a consistent answer to questions people are afraid to ask. Stay present, stay surrendered, stay aware. The same God who kept you when they wanted you gone is still actively involved in every unseen detail, still arranging moments, still softening paths, still strengthening your inner resolve, still preparing you for what your faith has not yet imagined, still working beyond what your eyes can confirm, still speaking in ways that require you to listen with your spirit rather than your fear, still shaping the next chapter with precision and intention as you continue forward, anchored not in what almost happened, but in what God has already decided will unfold. There is a deeper layer to what you are experiencing now, and it requires maturity to recognize it. God is not only guarding you from removal, He is repositioning your inner authority. Authority is not granted by titles or acceptance. It is revealed when pressure no longer dictates your behavior. The fact that you remained composed when your name was questioned tells God that you can be trusted with more than visibility. It tells Him you can be trusted with influence that does not announce itself. You are discovering that God often advances people quietly before He advances them publicly. The unseen star, Anthony, always comes first. If He elevated you too quickly, the weight of attention would distract from the depth of alignment He is cultivating. So He works in the shadows of ordinary days, reshaping your instincts, refining your reactions, teaching you how to hear His direction, even when emotions try to compete for your focus. This is not delay, this is design. There is also a shift happening in how you perceive opposition. What once felt like a threat is becoming information. God is training your discernment so that resistance no longer frightens you, it instructs you. You are learning to read patterns, to sense motives, to recognize when something is not aligned without needing proof or validation. This kind of awareness is not paranoia, it is wisdom sharpened by experience and anchored in trust. God is calling you to stop asking why you were targeted and start asking what you are being prepared to steward. Attention follows assignment. Pressure follows value you were not seeing. Let out because you are weak, but because you carry something that cannot be replicated easily. When God deposits purpose in a person, it draws both favor and friction. The same light that guides some will irritate others. Do not confuse isolation with abandonment. There are seasons when God separates people, not to punish them, but to protect the clarity of their calling. Too many voices dilute discernment. Too much explanation weakens obedience. God sometimes reduces the noise so His direction becomes unmistakable. In those moments, solitude becomes sanctuary and quiet becomes instruction. You may notice now that your tolerance for shallow interactions has changed. Conversations that once entertained you now feel empty. Environments that once energized you now feel draining. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. God is recalibrating your appetite so you hunger for what sustains purpose, not what distracts from it. Growth often looks like dissatisfaction with what once felt suffocating. Yan. There will be moments ahead when you are tempted to doubt this process because progress feels invisible. But God is not impressed by speed. He values depth. Quick growth can be fragile. Deep growth endures. What He is building in you must last beyond seasons, beyond places, beyond people. That kind of foundation takes time, pressure, and trust. Pay attention to how God is teaching you restraint. You no longer feel the urge to prove yourself. You are less interested in defending your name. That is not passivity. It is confidence rooted in something higher than opinion. When God becomes your vindication, you no longer need to fight for recognition. Peace becomes your confirmation. There is a lesson here about timing. January 27th did not remove you because it was not the appointed moment. Some exits are delayed because they would interrupt purpose. Some doors remain open longer than expected because God is still working through you there. Trust His timing even when it confuses you. God sees outcomes you cannot yet imagine. You are also being taught how to hold truth without weaponizing it. Just because you see clearly does not mean you must speak constantly. Wisdom chooses moments carefully. God values those who can carry revelation without arrogance, who can see without shaming, who can remain steady without superiority. This balance is rare, and it is being cultivated in you deliberately. Expect your faith to deepen in subtle ways, not louder words, but stronger conviction, not dramatic gestures, but consistent obedience. Faith that matures becomes less performative and more grounded. It shows up in how you treat people who misunderstand you, how you respond when credit is withheld, how you remain ethical when shortcuts are available. God is also teaching you about boundaries. Preservation is not only external, it is internal. You are learning when to engage and when to step back, when to invest and when to withhold. Boundaries are not walls, they are wisdom in action. They protect what God is building so it is not prematurely exposed or mishandled. There is a future moment connected to this season that will make sense of everything you endured. Understanding often arrives after obedience, not before it. When that clarity comes, you will realize that what felt like resistance was actually redirection. What felt like delay was preparation. What felt like rejection was insulation from paths that would have cost you more than you knew. Until then, remain faithful in the unseen. Continue choosing integrity when compromise would be easier. Continue trusting God when outcomes remain unclear. Continue listening when silence feels uncomfortable. The same God who kept you when removal was planned is still active, still intentional, still precise in His guidance. Let your life remain teachable. Let your heart remain open. Let your spirit remain attentive. You are not standing where you are by chance. You are there because God has determined your presence still serves His purpose, that your voice, spoken or unspoken, still carries weight, that your obedience still matters in ways you may never fully measure, and that what He is unfolding through you is far from finished, far from small, far from accidental, as He continues to lead, refine, and establish you according to His will. Now, listen closely, because this is the part that many people miss. God does not preserve you simply to keep you safe. God preserves you because He is preparing you to become a living example of what it looks like to remain when the world expects you to fall. The world is full of those who give up when they are misunderstood, who retreat when they are rejected, who disappear when they are unwanted. But you, because God kept you, have a different destiny. You are being made into a person who does not disappear under pressure. You are being made into a person who does not shrink in the face of opposition. You are being made into a person who stands and OT because the world applauds, but because God commands your endurance. This is not merely about survival, it is about becoming a vessel of endurance. God is not impressed by people who only stand when conditions are favorable. God is moved by those who stand when everything around them is unfavorable. When they wanted you gone and you remained, that was not merely stubbornness, that was obedience. That was faith. That was a refusal to surrender your destiny to the hands of those who do not understand the cost of your calling. There is a divine truth that must sink into your spirit. Those who oppose you are often the ones who are closest to being exposed. They are threatened by your alignment because it shines a light on their compromise. When you stand firm in God's will, you become a mirror to those who are living in contradiction. That mirror is uncomfortable. It makes them want to break you, not because you are wrong, but because they cannot bear the reflection of their own fear. Do not take their opposition personally. Take it spiritually. It is not about you. It is about what you represent. God is calling you to be a person of unwavering character. Character is not what you show when people are watching. Character is what you are when no one is watching. On January 27th, when the world was not watching, your character was still visible to God. You were still present. You were still faithful. You were still holding on. That is the kind of character that does not fade. That is the kind of character that is strengthened, not by praise, but by pressure. Do not be fooled into thinking that the pain you felt was wasted. God does not waste suffering. He uses it to build something in you that cannot be built any other way. The pain becomes the foundation of your compassion. The resistance becomes the source of your discernment. The disappointment becomes the catalyst for your spiritual maturity. God is shaping you into a person who can lead without being led by emotion, who can speak without being driven by anger, who can act without being controlled by fear. You must understand this. The day they wanted you gone is not just a day in your history. It's a defining moment in your spiritual development. It is the day God proved to you that His plan is greater than their intention. It is the day you discovered that God's presence in your life is not dependent on the approval of people. It is the day you learned that your value is not determined by the opinions of the crowd, but by the purpose God has placed inside you. There are people listening right now who have been living with the lie that rejection is the end of the story. They believe that when people turn away, God must have turned away too. But that is a deception. God's plan is not based on the approval of the world. God's plan is based on His will. And when the world rejects you, it is often because God is preparing to elevate you beyond the world's capacity to contain you. God is not concerned with making your life easy. God is concerned with making your life meaningful. If your life becomes too comfortable, it may be because you are settling for less than God's best. God's best is not always comfortable. God's best is often costly. God's best requires sacrifice. But God's best also produces legacy. God's best creates impact. God's best is worth enduring the storm. So do not despise the struggle. Do not reject the refining process. The heat of adversity is not there to destroy you. It is there to purify you. It is there to remove what is not aligned with God's will. It is there to separate what is temporary from what is eternal. And when you emerge, you will not be the same person who entered. You will be stronger. You will be wiser. You will be more aligned with God's purpose. Now, let me tell you something that may sting, but you need to hear it. You cannot be a vessel for God's purpose if you are constantly seeking the approval of people who have already shown you their lack of support. You must stop trying to win the favor of those who were never meant to carry your calling. You must stop bending yourself into shapes that fit other people's expectations. You must stop sacrificing your peace to gain acceptance from those who have already chosen your absence. God is calling you to a higher standard, not a higher standard of performance, but a higher standard of faith. A faith that does not rely on circumstances. A faith that does not rely on applause. A faith that does not rely on being understood. A faith that remains anchored in God alone. When God is your foundation, the opinions of people cannot shake you. When God is your identity, rejection cannot redefine you. When God is your source, scarcity cannot steal your confidence. There is a powerful truth in Scripture-inspired wisdom. God is not mocked. Whatever you sow, you will reap. If you sow faith, you will reap breakthrough. If you sow obedience, you will reap purpose. If you sow endurance, you will reap victory. On January 27th, you sowed endurance. You refused to be erased. You refused to be replaced. You refused to be silenced. And now, God is preparing a harvest that will reveal the power of what you have sown. But understand this, the harvest will not be instant. Harvest comes after a season of growth. Growth takes time. Growth requires patience. God is teaching you patience, not because He is delaying you, but because He is maturing you. Patience is not the absence of action. Patience is the presence of trust. When you trust God, you can wait without becoming anxious. When you trust God, you can stay faithful without seeing the full picture. When you trust God, you can remain steadfast even when the world expects you to crumble. Now, I want you to listen to this with your spirit. God is not only preserving you, He is also protecting your reputation. There are forces that try to destroy a person's name because they cannot destroy their purpose. But God is a defender of those who remain faithful. God will not allow false narratives to stand forever. Truth has a way of rising, even when it is buried. God's truth is like a seed planted in darkness. It grows unseen until it breaks through the surface and reveals itself to the world. So do not fear the lies. Do not fear the rumors. Do not fear the misinterpretations. God is the one who establishes your legacy. He is the one who confirms your identity. He is the one who knows the truth of your heart. And when God is the one who defines you, no human accusation can ultimately destroy you. There will be moments when you feel alone. There will be moments when you feel like no one understands what you are going through. But God understands. God knows every tear. God knows every sleepless night. God knows every moment you felt like giving up. God sees your faithfulness even when no one else does. And God's presence is not dependent on the presence of people. God's presence is constant. God's presence. CE is unwavering. God's presence is your greatest assurance. Now, I want you to take this to heart. Your survival is not your victory. Your victory is what you do with your survival. Many people survive and become bitter. Many people survive and become withdrawn. Many people survive and become cautious and fearful. But God is calling you to a different response. God is calling you to become a person of influence. God is calling you to become a person of purpose. God is calling you to become a person who uses their survival as a platform for testimony. Your testimony is not just about what you endure. Your testimony is about what you became because of it. Your testimony is about the strength you developed. Your testimony is about the faith you built. Your testimony is about the wisdom you gained. Your testimony is about the transformation that occurred when God was with you in the midst of the storm. And now, because God kept you, you are being given a new assignment, a new chapter, a new opportunity, a new level. But this new level will require a new you. God will not elevate you while you are still operating in the old mindset. God will not promote you while you are still living in the old patterns. God will not entrust you with more when you are still holding on to what He has already told you to let go of. So, let go. Let go of the need to be understood. Let go of the need to be accepted. Let go of the need to be validated. Let go of the need to prove your worth. Let go of the fear of being alone. Let go of the desire to control outcomes. Let go of the habit of looking to people for your security. Let go of the past that is trying to keep you small. Let go of the shame that is trying to define you. And hold on to God. Hold on to your faith. Hold on to your calling. Hold on to your integrity. Hold on to your peace. Hold on to the quiet assurance that God is still in control. Hold on to the truth that your life is not random. Hold on to the truth that your survival is not accidental. Hold on to the truth that God is with you and God is for you and God is working through you. Now, listen to this. There is a power in persistence. There is a power in refusing to be erased. There is a power in continuing to move forward even when the world expected you to stop. Persistence is a spiritual weapon. Persistence is a declaration that your faith is stronger than your circumstances. Persistence is a statement that God's will is greater than human plans. And God honors persistence. So when you feel like quitting, remember January 27. Remember the day they wanted you gone. Remember how God kept you. Remember how you remained. Remember that you were right to trust your spirit. Remember that you were right to hold on. Remember that God is the one who preserved you. And let that memory fuel your faith. Let it strengthen your resolve. Let it remind you that you are not alone. Let it remind you that God is still with you, and God is still working, and God is still guiding, and God is still elevating, and God is still faithful, and God is still powerful, and God is still in control, and God is still the one who defines your life, and God is still the one who decides your destiny, and God is still the one who holds your future, and God is still the one who will bring you through, and God is still the one who will make your life a testimony of His faithfulness, and God is still the one who will turn what they intended for harm into something that serves His purpose, and God is still the one who will cause your story to be a source of strength for others as you continue to stand, to trust, and to remain faithful. Now, in this final moment, I want you to hear this with every part. RT of your spirit, the day they wanted you gone is not a scar, it is a seal. It is a mark of survival. It is proof that God has not finished with you. The fact that you are still here means God still has a purpose for your life, a mission that is not complete, a story that is not yet finished. So do not let the memory of that day become a wound that keeps you small. Let it become a reminder that you were preserved for a reason. This is your call to action, your moment of reckoning. Examine your life with honesty. Where have you been living in fear of rejection? Where have you been shrinking to fit someone else's expectations? Where have you been compromising your values just to be tolerated? God is not asking you to become someone you are not. God is asking you to become the truest version of yourself, the version that aligns with His will, the version that refuses to be erased, the version that stands even when it costs something. Renew your purpose today, not tomorrow, not when the feels easier today. You have been spared for a reason. Your survival is not random. Your presence is not accidental. God is still speaking. God is still guiding. God is still leading. You must choose to listen. You must choose to obey. You must choose to rise. If you have been waiting for a sign, this is it. If you have been waiting for confirmation, here it is. God has kept you. God has preserved you. God has positioned you. Now it is time for you to move. Walk closer to God with intentionality. Let your life be a constant response to His faithfulness. Let your choices reflect His wisdom. Let your heart remain sensitive to His guidance. Let your spirit remain obedient to His will. Do not allow the voices of doubt to drown out the voice of God. Do not allow the opinions of others to become louder than the truth God has spoken over you. You were chosen. You were preserved. You were not forgotten. You were not overlooked. You were not abandoned. And now, as you stand at this door, Isho, I challenge you to commit to a higher standard of faith. Not a faith that is dependent on comfort, but a faith that is strengthened through trials. Not a faith that needs applause, but a faith that stands when the world is silent. Not a faith that fades when opposition rises, but a faith that grows stronger under pressure. God is calling you to be a person whose life is a living testament to the power of perseverance, the power of trust, and the power of God's presence. So rise. Rise from the ashes of what you thought was the end. Rise from the doubts that tried to steal your destiny. Rise from the rejection that tried to silence your voice. Rise from the fear that tried to make you invisible. Rise with the strength that comes from God alone. Let your life be a declaration that what they intended for harm has been transformed into a platform for purpose. Let your existence be proof that God's plan cannot be interrupted by human opposition. And when you walk out of this moment, walk with your head held high, your spirit anchored, and your heart aligned. Know that God is with you. Know that God has not forgotten you. Know that God is still working. Know that God is still leading. Know that God is still guiding. Know that God is still faithful. Know that God is still powerful. Know that God is still in control. Know that God is still the one who defines your life. Know that God is still the one who decides your destiny. Know that God is still the one who holds your future. Know that God is still the one who will bring you through. And now, let this be the truth that settles in your spirit forever. You are right to stay. You are right to trust. You are right to endure. You are right to believe. You are right to keep going. Because God is with you, God is for you, and God is the one who has the final word over your life.